Blackmagic Design's DaVinci Resolve 17 is a pretty amazing tool, but you already knew that. So today I'm going to show you how simple it is to get your Final Cut Pro project, your timeline, into DaVinci Resolve so you can color grade and edit your video further. Now I'm covering the full Roundtrip workflow, but if you're stuck on just a single step, use the timestamps in the description to jump to the section you need help with. Now let's dive in. So we're over here in Final Cut Pro. This is 10.5.2. It's the current version as of today. And I've got this simple sequence. It's got some sound effects, some music. I'll just play a little bit of it. It's about 60 seconds long. And you get the idea. It's basically, it's this guy on this typewriter, yada, yada, yada. We don't really care about that. We want to know what we're doing. So we're going to be taking this project here, this timeline. We're going to duplicate it, Command D. And when we duplicate it, I like to rename these always to call them something like, to Resolve or Color Prep or something like that, and then actually work from that version of it. So we always have a safety net to go back to. And now the first thing we're gonna do to prepare this to go to Resolve is simplify the timeline. So to do that, we're gonna take these layers that are on above the primary storyline and knock them down. Select them with our mouse, we'll hit Command Option down arrow, and that's going to smash things down into the primary storyline, so it's just one continuous thought, and when you're color grading it makes things a lot simpler. Now beyond that, there's a couple other things we've got going on in the timeline. There is a compound clip right here, so if you look, there's sort of a graphic that comes up in it. We're going to break apart compound clips, and we're also going to do some finalizing of auditions. So if you don't know what auditions are, it's basically a way to change and try out different clips. And so we're gonna finalize those. The way you can find them quickly is if you go to timeline index over here and start typing the word audition, not audio, type audition, and that'll pull that up over here. And then you can go to clip, audition, finalize audition, and that sort of locks that in place. From this point on, we're gonna go with that shot. Makes sense, right? And then the same kind of thing over here with compound clips. This I know is a compound clip, but if you didn't know where it was, you could go to the timeline index and type in compound clip, and it'll pull it up right there for you, which is great. And then to break it apart, it's called break apart clips is the command. It's Command Shift G, and that just pulled that custom Final Cut Pro title out of that compound clip. That's gonna be really useful because Resolve is not gonna know how to display this title correctly over in Resolve. So it kind of has like a blur if I play this. Okay, so that's important to know. And then the other thing I want to point out here on this timeline is it has a speed ramp effect on this shot right here. So you can see it goes from 40% to 100% speed, and it kind of has that smooth transition between. Resolve does a pretty good job of maintaining that speed ramp. It's not 100% perfect, so don't expect it to be, but it's better than most translations on speed ramps. There's no way to flatten a multicam clip in Final Cut Pro like there is in Premiere or in Avid. So you just leave them. And actually, so these ones right here are multicam clips. You can see that I've got two different angles available. If you want to change the angles later in Resolve, you can actually do that because the FCP XML translates that information and it works really good. You just cannot change the angles once you come back into Final Cut Pro. It's kind of a one-way street as far as that goes. So now our Final Cut Pro project or timeline is all set to go over to Resolve. We're gonna go up to File, Export XML right there. Click on that sucker. We're gonna be using the current version 1.9 and put it into the From FCP folder. We'll hit Save. And it kicked it out that quickly. And the reason it's able to do that is because an XML here out of Final Cut does not contain any media. There's no footage inside this little file. And you'll see that because I'll click on it and it's only 146 kilobytes. So it's really tiny. It's great. You can email it to anyone. You can airdrop it. It's basically the instructions list of your whole timeline. It's when does a clip stop and start? Where is it in the timeline? How big is it? How fast does it play? All that information is included in that file. However, the media is not included. So this is a really important thing. If you're going to send it to another computer or someone that's not on the same storage as you, you need to send them the footage too. And the way you do that, or an easy way to do that here in Final Cut, is to select your library and then go to File, Copy to Library, New Library. And that'll just make sure it gives you an option to copy your generated files over. The other thing besides the XML that is great to send over and is a really smart idea is to send a reference movie. And the way we're going to send a reference movie is to just go up here to the export settings. We'll choose master file. And I like to choose ProRes proxy because it's both sort of small, but it also plays back really great. Oh, the other thing that's kind of nice to change here in your export settings is action says QuickTime Player default. Let's do save only. What if it's set to QuickTime Player? It's gonna, as soon as it kicks this out, it's gonna launch QuickTime and open your file. And a lot of times we don't need to see that, so just hit save only. Just that's a little bonus tip. We'll hit next, and it's gonna tell us where we want to save that, or ask us where we want to save that. And I'm actually gonna be putting that in the same spot, the from FCP folder, so that the XML and the reference movie are in the same spot. And then if you want to see how far along this is, some people don't know this is here. This little gear is going to show us our progress of it exporting this this video. Super quick, I just want to say hi and welcome if you're new here to this channel. I'm Chadwick. This is Creative Video Tips, which is all about helping you create videos that make a difference and stand out. If that's something you're into, consider subscribing right down below right now if you haven't already done so you don't miss out on the new tip next week. With that out of the way, let's open up Resolve and check out that FCP XML. So now that we have our FCP XML, let's go to Resolve 17. The way we're going to open it is File, Import, Timeline, or just not use that, and you can use the shortcut Command-Shift-I, which is what I'll do here, Command-Shift-I, and then select the XML that way, click Open. It gives us a little bit of a scary window, but if you're on the same computer that you did all your editing on Final Cut Pro, you can just leave these alone. It's going to link to your source clips. It's going to use your sizing information. That's anytime you like blew something up or move something left or right. And we'll click OK. And as it's pulling in, it should get all of our edits. Over here in the edit page, you can see we have our Final Cut Pro project file. It's like the whole thing's like, it's right here. It's amazing. It's awesome, right? A couple things didn't translate, and they probably won't for you either. Is the mix is going to be really bad and loud. And the other I've got on here are these titles that were Final Cut Pro custom titles that had like a blur that came in. Those are gone. So if I play the back, you can see that mix is terrible. Those are gone. Also, if you had any sort of special transitions that you used in Final Cut Pro, those are not going to come into Resolve either. But if you go back to Final Cut Pro, those will get reapplied as long as you don't mess with them here in Resolve. Next, I'm going to show you how we use the reference movie that we had exported from Final Cut Pro to make sure our timeline is actually what it's supposed to be, and we can know frame by frame if it's correct or not. We're going to go to our media pool page, and we're going to make some new bins here. We're going to just make one called cuts. I always like to keep my XML files separate, so we'll be dragging that into there. We're going to make another bin. We'll call it offline ref, and another one, and we'll call that one just ref. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So here is this clip right here is just the baked reference movie that we had kicked out of Final Cut Pro. We're going to add this as an offline reference. We're going to right click on it from up here. We'll say add as offline reference clip. Okay, and then this other bin, we're just going to drag the clip in. And we're going to use these in two different ways. I know you think I'm crazy for doing it this way. The first way is we're going to link that XML file to the offline reference clip. So we're going to select this, and we're going to say timeline, link offline reference clip, and because we added one to the project as an offline reference clip, we actually have an option here. If you didn't do that, you won't have this option. We're going to say storyline Roundtrip demo clip for color, so it's the same one. And what this does, it's pretty slick. If you go to the edit page now, and you go over here, you have an option for offline. And what the offline is the window here on the left side is the reference movie. It's the baked video file that you sent out of Final Cut Pro. The right side is your timeline that's down below, okay? So I'm just gonna turn this volume off so we're not distracted by it. But what this is doing is, as I scrub the timeline, it's saying this parked playhead is the timeline, and this right here is a separate movie file we had exported. So if those are not the same shots, you know that there's an issue. But I actually got a better way to compare stuff. This offline reference thing is going to come in handy when we jump to the color page and we start comparing color corrections. The other way I'm going to show you here with this other one that I called reference is we're going to overwrite it and use a transfer mode. So let's go to check out our media pool so we can see our reference movie. So this is the media type clip we had just dragged in. We're going to select that sucker, move it to the beginning. We're going to target the track we want, which is a new MP track. So I have it going to the top track. I'm going to hit F10. Okay, F10 just overwrote just the video clip up there. Okay, and so you're saying like, well, this is kind of dumb. I just see the clip on top. But here's where the magic happens. You select it, you go to your inspector, and we're going to use a transfer mode over here. the composite mode, I guess is what they call it in here, and we use difference. And what that has done is it's looking for difference in pixels between what's on top and what's on bottom, right? So what that would mean is if it saw anything other than black, there's something is not matching up between your reference movie and what was imported into DaVinci Resolve. Right there, you can see there's an example. The titles did not come across correctly. But we knew that was going to happen because it can't do those, but it can export it and then work back in Final Cut Pro. If it wasn't the same, this is where you would actually select the clip, you'd go to the inspector and maybe change the transform a little bit or do a trim, like a slip or something, to get it frame accurate so that it is perfectly black so that it matches exactly. So now that we've checked everything using this reference movie and the composite mode set the difference, everything's black except for our titles like we expected. We're going to do a little bit more cleanup here. We're going to delete this reference clip, just select it and delete it. And then we're also going to select all our audio and delete it because it doesn't translate back into Final Cut Pro all that great. So we're going to leave the audio that we've been using in Final Cut Pro. The way to do that is make sure your audio and video are unlinked right here. Then you can just lasso them all with your mouse if you want, hit delete, and that sort of cleans that up. Let's say we want to go over here and do some color correction. We would come over here. Something simple we could do is go to our timeline node, do Option S to add a new node, and let's make it black and white, for instance. Okay, so we'll go over here, we'll say monochromatic, and we can, go over here, add a little contrast, maybe do a little crunchy S-curve to it or something. This is not a color grading tutorial by any means, but I do want to show you how you can use that linked offline reference clip that we had linked up over here in the media page in the color page. So back over to the color page, if you right click in this screen right over here, we have reference wipe mode. And if you choose offline here, it's going to be referencing the frame that's in the offline clip. So to access that, if you hit Command W, we can actually see both at the same time. So right there, the black and white is our color corrected version. And this goes for every single frame as we move through the timeline, which is pretty awesome. The button to turn the wipe on and off is right over here. It's called Image Wipe. So super helpful little tool there. You can see the before and the after, and it's a lot of fun just to sort of wipe that on. So now we can see we have color correction or black and white applied to all the footage down here. So we can see something different when we go back into Final Cut. If we go to our project settings, you can see we actually cut this all at 1920 by 1080. It's easier to edit with if you edit at HD, and you can also see it on preview monitors if you don't have a 4K output box or display. So I'm going to change the timeline resolution here to 3840 by 2160. That's going to upscale everything to 4K. Okay, and it maintains all the transformations, all the scaling that you did. And to get that full enchilada out of here, we're going to be going over to the deliver page. And there is a preset that's built right into Resolve. If you choose Final Cut Pro 7, then choose Final Cut Pro 10, this is kind of going to do all the work for you. You have a couple things to choose though, and I want to point those out. So under Export Video, you have Type. I'm going to choose ProRes 422 Standard. It's great quality and file sizes. And then another thing a lot of people aren't aware of is if you go under Advanced Settings, you normally need to open this up. And at the very bottom of Advanced Settings, there is an option to add frame handles. And a frame handle is basically, it's the section of clip before and after what you see on the timeline. The reason this is important is if you want to change the transition duration or make any sort of edit tweaks later on, if you don't have those handles there, you don't have media to pull and push from with your color corrected footage. So that's where you would do that. I'm going to put 0 on this because I'm going to say this is done. Final done, master, final finished, whatever you want to call it. We're going to audio over here, and we'll choose uncheck export audio because the translation on the audio, as we talked about before, doesn't work great. So we're just exporting a video clip. And then under the file tab, we have export using unique file names. And this is important because all your files, if you have multiple files on your timeline from the same clip, it's going to render those out as different file names so that XML connects to them correctly because they're all going into the same folder. Speaking of folders, we need to choose where we're going to put it. So if you look under location right here and choose browse, we need to choose a place to put them. I'm going to choose this from Resolve folder, click add to render queue, and then this is the point where all things can be lost if you don't do this. Hit save. So Resolve, I just hit save. So Resolve will crash at this instant if it's going to crash on you. So make sure you hit save so you don't lose all that work that we just did. We'll hit render all, and this thing's going to start cooking. So you can see the playhead. It kind of gives you a real-time update, kind of like After Effects does when it renders, so you can see things as they export. All those clips are exporting right now. It's going to export the XML, and we'll be pulling that back into Final Cut Pro. So while that's exporting, a lot of people have also asked me, why did I become a video editor? Well, to cut a long story short, just so you know, there's also an option to export a single flat video clip as well instead of this XML workflow. But honestly, it's great to be able to have your video all chopped up when it's back in Final Cut Pro. That way you can retain any of the original transitions that aren't just simple cross dissolves. Now we can see as Resolve has kicked those out, we have a folder here, the From Resolve one. These are the black and white clips that came straight out of Resolve. They're the color corrected versions we worked on. They're also 4K. If we open up one of these suckers and do Command I to get info, these are the full resolution clips, okay? 3840 by 2160. And we have the FCP XML. Two ways you can pull this in. One that a lot of people don't know about, you can just double click an FCP XML if you have Final Cut Pro installed, and then say, hey, I want to put this into a brand new library. You create it, it pulls it in. That's pretty awesome. If you have audio already though, that is in a project like we're doing right here, I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to come to our project that we had worked on earlier in this video, this 4-color one. We'll go to File, Import, XML. Okay, File, Import, XML. We will choose the From Resolve folder, and the XML that Resolve had made. We'll click Import, and it's gonna pull this in and put it in a new event over here. So if I'm able to scroll this over here, you can see it does this thing. It puts a Resolve in parentheses. So this is the Resolve XML that came straight back out of there. And what you'll notice that's pretty cool is those titles with that fade, that comes back in. It retained that. Even though it didn't play it right in Resolve, it's playing it right back over here, which is really awesome. So the titles are looking good, but let's look at this first clip here. We can actually see there are black bars around this. That means our transforms, if I open up the inspector here, it did not do what we wanted it to. It still says it's 100%. Well, that's because we exported it at 3840 by 2160. And the way we're gonna maintain that ratio and that framing that we had done is actually, we're gonna just, the simplest thing is to select all your clips here that you've brought back in, select them all, and we're gonna change what they call down here at the bottom, the spatial conform type. Instead of it being fit, we're gonna change this to fill. This might be one of the few times you use fill in here. So this is because anything with like mixed aspect ratios are gonna fill whatever the timeline resolution is. And if we look at our timeline resolution by clicking the project, we can see this is 3840 by 2160. This is our full HD project file size. But we have no sound on this. So the way we solve that is we select them all with Command A, Command C to copy them. Okay, simple enough. We'll go back to our timeline here. That's in the other event, the one that we made for color, right? This one right here. We'll go to the beginning, home, takes us to the first frame, and we're gonna paste as a connected clip. It's Option V, okay? I believe it's also, if you go up to the edit menu, you can see paste as connected clip. What that does is it just stacks it on top. So this is another way you can A/B check your original timeline with what you sent to DaVinci Resolve. And for this transform one, which is kind of tricky, if we go over to it and we hit V, which disables the clip, we can see it is exactly frame by frame, including the blow up now that we had done, the same as before. And that goes with all the clips. The other thing though to point out is we just pasted this back into a 1920 by 1080 timeline. The way you change that is you click on the timeline, say modify over here, and we can just change this here to say 4K, which in this instance is going to be this resolution, the UHD version. So it's really pretty amazing. We start in Final Cut Pro, we send it out to DaVinci Resolve, maybe we use the speed editor, maybe we wanted to use the great color tools, and then we brought it back into Final Cut Pro, you know, because we have custom titles or transitions and stuff. But what if we want to just stay in DaVinci Resolve after we get out of Final Cut Pro? That's where the bonus tip comes in. For the bonus tip, I'm going to show you how to use the roles feature to export your Final Cut Pro titles, the custom ones, so you're not recreating those over again in Resolve. And you don't have to do much to take advantage of it. You just use the export here, master file, and then under roles, we're going to make a change. We're going to, instead of saying QuickTime Movie, we're going to say video only as separate files, and we're going to remove all video, and we're going to just do it so it's only all tiles. And the other thing we need to do is under settings, we need to change the resolution. So in order for it to have titles that have the transparency, you know, like the clear film from back those days when you're in school and you had those Elmo projectors, you would just change this to something that has transparency. So like ProRes 444 is a great option, so I would choose that one. And then make sure under, like I said, under roles, you have video only as separate files, and then just all titles. You click next, and you know, say where you want it to go, say from FCP. And what that's going to kick out is a timeline that's the same length as whichever your video is in there, but it's going to be transparency until it sees a title, and it's going to bake in and render all those special animated effects. Maybe you have a custom motion graphics template or something that you used in Final Cut Pro. You can then use that in Resolve. Whoops, one more thing I wanted to mention real quick is if you want to get your sound, your mix over in Resolve sounding great and using what you've done in Final Cut Pro, you could just export that as a stereo mix down. So clicking the share menu right here, clicking master file, and then under settings, instead of choosing the format audio and video, you could choose audio only, and then you have the option here of just exporting only like a AIFF or a WAV mix down, which would sound great over in Resolve. It's just not editable anymore. Now please let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions at all. I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. And if you want to learn more about DaVinci Resolve, even using the new speed editor or editing in Final Cut Pro, I've got 2 playlists that should be popping up right now, and they are filled with tons of great tips to save you time and frustration. So I'll see you over in that next video.